Ever since I was a child, people said my family was cursed. Mom tried to protect us with God. Pop tried to protect us with wrestling. He said if we were the toughest, the strongest, nothing could ever hurt us. I believed him. We all did.
Morning.
Pants tomorrow, please, David.
Perry, I want you to join your brothers in the ring.
Yes, sir. I love that.
Woo! Now, we all know Kerry's my favorite, then Kev, then David, then Mike. But the rankings can always change.
What do you want in life, Kevin Von Erich?
More ribs? I want to be with my family. You know, be with my brothers.
What do you like to do with your brothers?
Together, we can do anything.
We're here to restore justice to the Wrestling Federation that our father built with his own two hands. The hands that were passed down to us. The hands that will deliver the Iron Claw to you.
So what do you think? Like we're alive.
I love your family, Kevin.
You gonna be an uncle?
Yes, sir.
Oh man, that makes me so happy.
I'll talk to you about something, Mom. Dad's too tough on us. You gotta say something.
Baby, that's what your brothers are for.
Feel that? You feel that? That's pressure.
You're pushing too hard.
I'm fine, kid. Seriously, I'm just sick.
I'm scared, man. It all out of control.
That's a terrible accident.
I should have stopped him. I need to think about my family.
Your job is to wrestle. Live up to that deal, or we are through. I told you to look out for him!
I just love being out there with you guys. It's the only thing that matters to me.
The Bonner will forever be the greatest family in the history of wrestling.
Today, he recalls the origins of the hole he made famous, the Iron Claw.
Well, I got the idea that originally in Japan, from an old sumo friend of mine over there, about the tepon, and they knew the strength of this hand. It was getting stronger all the time, and that's where the idea came from. I was really waiting for the opportune time to do it. It didn't come along for maybe 20 or 30 matches later.
Welcome, everybody, to Working the Indies. Oh, yeah, with the one and only Bryan Tann. I am Joe Compton. And today, we're going to dissect the Iron Claw and jump into territory talk today with the world-class championship wrestling and all that represents, because there is two sides to this, really, in my opinion, Bryan. It's the stuff that really happened and then the movie.
Yeah, I realize that I really am starting to hate biopics more and more because they always use the excuse, oh, well, we left this out because for storytelling.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, if it's part of someone else's story, how do you cut it out?
Yeah.
Like, that's ridiculous. That's just like if you're going to make a story about my life,
yeah,
and then you cut out like people that were in my life for an extended period of time that was important. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, I see if you make a story about my life and you cut out, a high school girlfriend.
Right.
That's one thing. She had no impact on my life, but you can't do a story of my life and then cut my ex-wife out of it. You just can't. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't have so much a problem with the cutting out stuff. I get that, being a filmmaker and everything like that. It's the embellishing and adding things in there that bothers me a little bit more.
Yeah,
that creative license that is kind of honing a narrative that really didn't exist in this. That's where I draw the line in that aspect. All being said, though, I'm curious what you thought of the actual movie itself as a movie.
I thought that as a movie, it was really, really good. This was Zac Efron at his best. Legit, I will not entertain any slander on that man ever again. Because that man embodied Kevin Von Erich. You want to talk about losing yourself in a role. Am I ready to put him on the same level as a Daniel Day-Lewis or Heath Ledger? No. Am I willing to put him up there with, say, a Johnny Depp when he would lose himself into a role? Absolutely. I believed that he was Kevin Von Erich. I saw none of the corniness and silliness that we've come to associate of Zac Efron over the last 10 years.
I 1,000% agree. I think of all of the brothers, and I've watched all of them. I've watched them do promos. I've watched them do shoot interviews. I've watched them do actual wrestling. Of all of the brothers, this was tailor-made for him, really, because Kevin is one of those guys that always had a thing about he wasn't a very good talker. He wasn't
the best of his brothers at all, but he put everything together better than his brother. Let's be real.
He was the one who was most built to be in the business.
Correct, because he had the mindset for the business. Kerry had all of the talent. Yeah. Kerry was amazing. I'm old enough to remember Kerry Von Erich when he was the Texas Tornado.
Yeah.
And sadly enough, I only got to see him as the Texas Tornado. I didn't get to see some of his finer work in World Class Championship Wrestling. But from what I did get to see was amazing. And the fact that man could perform on a prosthetic foot the way he did is a testament to his talent. And you would never have known. David was the talker. Kevin had to outwork both of his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't talk anywhere near as good as David. He had to work 10 times harder to be just barely as good, if not a step below Kerry. Now, if David hadn't passed away, he would have been the champ. And honestly, I could have seen him being in New York or in Atlanta running the show. You know, if we could do a what if scenario, I probably would have seen David Von Erich feuding with Magnum TA if Magnum TA doesn't get injured for the WCW title in Crockett, in the Crockett Promotions. And if you had that, now granted, we still would have needed to have, you know, the Attitude Era in the NWO, but WCW would have been a much bigger deal than it was if David Von Erich doesn't pass away. Because I just see David's talent fitting more in the Southern wrestling instead of the up north wrestling.
And I think all the brothers would have stayed with him. They wouldn't have been as cinematic as the Bloodline, but they would have been a storyline that you could have told against the Four Horsemen. I mean, the Von Erichs had epic battles with the Fabulous Freebirds.
Yes,
in the Southern territories.
Yeah, so. and they would have carried that over to battling with Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen, and it would have been amazing.
Yeah, and it would have been cool to see one of the brothers turn on one of the brothers too. That would have been interesting.
And I think that would have been David. David would have been the one to do the heel turn. Now, the way they told the story was well done, and it was tragic.
I mean, we should give a shout out to Jeremy Allen White, who played Kerry, and Harrison Dickinson, who played David. Both very, very good in their roles. Yeah. I think Jeremy Allen White, of all of the brothers, was the best shown wrestler. He really embodied Kerry's movements, and I mean, the drop kick he did
The drop kick was spot
Perfect.
on. Chris Dickinson, Jeremy Allen White, definitely, they, like Zac Efron, took the project very, very seriously, studied the respective wrestlers, got the cadence of their voices down right. Like, you believed that Jeremy Allen White was Kerry, just like you believe Zac Efron was Kevin. And Jeremy Allen White has come a long way from since being Lip Gallagher.
Yeah.
But Stanley Simmons as Mike Von Erich definitely was amazing as well.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously we have to. I mean, my biggest gripe is the way that they portrayed Fritz in this movie. I didn't like.
They made him so selfish, living through his kids.
I mean, if you want to see the real Fritz, there's plenty of interviews of him on YouTube, and he is unassuming guys you would ever think for a big giant dude that he was. He was huge. People don't realize how big this guy was.
Right.
You know?
And I think that Kevin has talked about his relationship with his father and his brothers over the years.
Yeah.
Especially with the whole curse being put, the curse moniker put on their family.
Yeah.
Which
was interesting that they chose to make that a narrative too, which was very, very interesting. Yeah. I think that played well on screen. It was weird that they even mentioned it. Like, literally, it was part of the dialogue.
Well, it's kind of like they did the same thing with dragging the Bruce Lee story.
Yeah.
Playing up the curse.
Yeah.
And it's real easy when, misfortune falls upon a family like it's done with the Von Erichs and with the Lee family, it's easy to say it's a curse. And talking about the characterization of Fritz Von Erich, Holt McClamey was an amazing choice. If you're going to get a guy that looks a heel and acts a heel.
Very good.
Now, for us old heads, we remember Holt McCallany as Teddy Atlas in the HBO made-for-TV film on Mike Tyson's life.
Yeah.
Who was Mike Tyson's first full-time trainer. He was also in Fight Club, where, they didn't really mention him by name, but he was amazing in Fight Club, Three Kings, Vantage Point, which is such an underappreciated film, Casualties of War, Alien 3.
And a lot of people would recognize him as Bill Tench from Mindhunters, the Netflix series that David Fincher put together. And I also have to say, you have to give a shout out to Maura Tierney.
She is an amazing actress. And
Lily James, who both of them, matriarchs of their family. The real people, when we're talking about Pam and Doris, the real people involved in the Von Erichs. But in a movie that's just soaked with testosterone and misogyny and everything, these two women really took it on and made something really, really spectacular with both of their characters. I really found both of them very fascinating.
I agree. And it was very, very powerful when she was just looking at that dress, the same dress she wore to each of her son's funerals. Yeah. She's like, I just can't do it. Yeah. I just can't.
It's amazing.
And Lily James, man, so sweet, so beautiful, so
perfect as
perfect as Pam. Absolutely. Because she's one of those people in Hollywood that she's gorgeous without being arrogant.
Yeah, and she's very sassy and
very sassy. And just the fact of the matter is that she, being a Brit, can walk in and play a Texan convincingly. Basically, playing anyone as a Southerner convincingly. But with all of the amazing characters and acting that we got, there is one that did not fit. Had the look, but nothing else.
I know where you're going because we've talked about this.
Yeah, I ranted heavily.
So let's unpack this. Let's start on the positive note. Who do you feel of all of the known names of all the actors who do you feel like played their role the best of all the sub characters of all the wrestlers? Who was the best representation of that wrestler?
I think MJF did a good job doing the Lance Von Erich. He was totally against type. And you want to talk about a guy who, if he decides to go into Hollywood, is going to do an amazing job. MJF is very, very talented. Because I didn't recognize him, number one, which was amazing.
You had to find him.
Yeah. Ryan Nemeth, the younger brother of Nick Nemeth, aka Dolph Ziggler. Ryan Nemeth
probably playing the guy who should have been the heel in the movie, but that's fine.
Yes. Who played Gino Hernandez, who was a heel in his own right.
And had a very, very venomous relationship with the Von Erichs.
Yes, he was not as cool with the Von Erichs as they made it out to be. Yeah. He was not happy to be putting over any of the boys at all. I think Kevin Atton as Harley Race was spot on.
That's the one for me. Kevin Anton as Harley Race was my absolute spot on. I thought I couldn't believe that looking at him as an actor and who he has played and who he is.
So many he's a character actor. Never
you would
a
know
star.
him if you saw him in a lot.
He's absolutely the guy that you know to see, but you don't know his name. His presence steals the scene, which is exactly what Harley Race did. Harley Race never had the body of anyone that he went up against.
Yeah.
But you believed he would kick the ever-loving snot out of you.
Yeah.
And Kevin Atton brought that energy.
I'm world's heavyweight champion. Me, Harley Race, the real world's heavyweight champion. Not any of this plastic nonsense that you all parade around with out there. You have all these guys walking around talking loud about how they are the man. Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Tommy Rich, or one of your snot-nosed Von Erich kids.
This film painted Fritz as the biggest heel.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was an odd choice for the heel.
And that's another issue that I tend to have with the biopic genre.
Yeah.
Is that it's almost like there needs to be a heel and then they have to push it out there, because there was so much that, I did a lot of research after watching this film. And, there's so much stuff that went on, especially with the death of Carrie's death.
Yeah.
That was sort of put in for drama. And it's like, why?
Ironically, I listened to an interview with Fritz, and he talked about how Mike was the one that was closest to him as a person, which makes a lot of sense because Fritz never wanted to be in the wrestling business. And so, he did it out of necessity because he was big and he was, bulky and he got
he had nothing else. There was nothing. Plus, football didn't work out for him.
Right. Yeah.
But
he was also very artistic. He mentioned in the movie he played the clarinet, but they didn't mention that he was he was classically trained, and he was part of an orchestra in high school that went across the world and toured.
Question: I wouldn't want to ask Kevin this question of why would you let them paint your father as that big of a heel? But at the same token, once contracts are signed, studios are going to do what studios do.
Yeah.
And you just kind of have to maybe look at it as maybe from a narrative perspective. Maybe Kevin saw Fritz as the heel.
Yeah.
But
he didn't write this, so he
didn't. He didn't write it, and I'm sure that once he signed the contracts, like I said, the studios are like, well, this is what we got to do.
I have mixed feelings about Sean Durkin, who is the writer-director of this film. Sean is an incredible craftsman. If you've seen any of his indie films, he did Marcy May. He also did a movie with Jude Law that was really good. But he's an incredible filmmaker. He's got an incredible eye, and I loved the wrestling stuff in this movie. I thought the wrestling stuff was really well done. I thought the atmosphere and the way he shot it and the coloring he used and everything like that, the shots were fantastic.
Agreed.
The thing that I question, though, is this: Sean was born during this time. He was a toddler.
He's young. Yeah, he's younger than us.
And maybe this was just Sean's passion. He loves wrestling, so maybe he just wanted to make a movie like this. And that's fair, and that's fine. And he's entitled to the way he wants to see it, interpret it. He's the filmmaker. Right. I just question if there was somebody out there they could have got that was a little bit more alive during this time period.
I feel like this is a story that would have been better told by a little bit older of a filmmaker, someone that was actually alive and a wrestling fan. I took a lot of exception to the elimination of Fritz Von Erich in the story and sort of combining his character with Mike Von Erich. I feel that was a completely disrespectful thing to do. I don't care. Honestly, like legit, you could like people can come up to me and say, well, Kevin didn't have a problem with it, blah, blah, blah. All right, that's fine. I do have a problem with it. I feel like, as the middle child of, of 3 boys and a girl, I feel like eliminating a sibling like that is disrespectful. I feel that even if you can sit here and tell me, well, Chris and Mike were very, very similar. Yeah, but that doesn't mean they are the same person.
Yeah.
And I really feel like you sort of do a disservice to the memory of Mike and Chris by combining them into one being, because they're their own person. And you know this as a sibling, especially if you're close in age to your siblings, you are always fighting for your own identity.
Yeah.
And when your sibling is older than you, I'm 7 years younger than my older brother. My younger brother is 8 years younger than me. You also fight against your identity being their younger brother.
Yeah.
So I feel like combining Chris and Mike into one character disrespects that.
Ric Flair. Woo! 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 Woo!
That being said, here's your opportunity. Tell us about why
Aaron Dean Eisenberg. Who the hell taught this man how to woo? He sounded like he was trying to do a Kurt Angle impression, trying to woo with Ric Flair. He had the look. The look wasn't bad, but the talk, the cadence, the woo was not there. It wasn't there. And I legit want to know, why did y'all think, like, as a filmmaker, do you ever do anything and just be like, you know what, it ain't really great, but we'll take what we got?
Yeah.
Like, do these guys ever, I've always wondered as a filmmaker, do you ever see, like, you got to see it and know it's not going to fly. Do you just think people ain't going to notice?
You can only do so many takes with a guy, I think, maybe. I don't know. Maybe in Sean Durkin's mind, he did it well. I don't know. That's hard to say because it's hard. And maybe you don't realize it until after the fact and you're starting editing it, and that happens too. But, yeah, I agree. Not only was the woo off, his cadence as Ric Flair.
It wasn't great. And it's almost like, well, we don't have to do much. Just give him bleach blonde hair, give him some glasses, have him dress nice and be a dick. There we go. We got Ric Flair. No. There was
and ironically, he wasn't the worst for me. I really felt like the Fabulous Freebirds were really, really like they were caricatures because they didn't get a lot of talking in this movie at all, but when you saw them, it looked like a Dark Side of the Ring reenactment when they were wrestling. It looked like, okay, we're going to put guys that kind of look like the Fabulous
Freebirds. They kind of maybe resemble. We're going to get a guy and just give him a real hairy chest.
The guy who played Terry Gordy with the fro. The fro was lacking, first of all. The fro was horrible. Yes. But then you put the beer gut on Terry Gordy, and it's just like, okay.
And Terry Gordy didn't really have the gut until later. He was just a thick ass kicker.
Yeah, and then the Michael Hastings, we're just going to paint in a beard, and that's going to be good.
Yeah, we're just going to... Yeah, it was almost like the casting call was, do you have a hairy chest? I'll tell you what, I think one of the most emotional moments of this film is when Kevin is watching the boys play, and then he just starts bawling. And, Ross and Marshall come up to him and as little kids, and they're like, "What's wrong, Dad?" And he goes, "I used to be a brother, and now I'm not a brother anymore." And they go, well, we'll be your brothers, Dad. And that was the sweetest thing.
Yeah, that was really great.
But can you imagine how difficult that must be? Yeah. That you weren't even the oldest. Yeah. You had to become the oldest due to tragedy. And now you're the only one.
There's a great line too in that date scene where he talks about where she goes, "Oh, you're the oldest," and he goes, "No, I'm not the oldest." You know?
Right. He had to like really sort of correct her on that.
Right. Yeah.
He was like, "No, and I'll tell you what. I always thought Kevin was the oldest. I did. I always thought Kevin was the oldest. And then I was like, Kevin and Carrie as little kids? Who the hell's Jack? Oh. No, I'll tell you what, though. It was really just so well done. This film, the ring work, the camera angles in the ring just did an amazing job.
I love the absolute look of it. I think the look was perfect. I thought it was reminiscent of a dream sequence with a lot of like darkness to it that was really foreshadowed. The look foreshadowed everything that was coming up, and I really felt like that was a brilliant choice by Sean Durkin. I just think that was so well done. The acting is very good in this film. Obviously, being a wrestling fan, there's a lot that I have consternation with in terms of the wrestling aspect of it and the true story. But that being said, I think it was really well done, and I also think there's a heavy admission in here that I think would have helped. But I understand why it wasn't a part of it. But that would have been Jerry Lawler. Jerry Lawler should have been in this movie because he's the reason that WCCW gets a little bit further in its landscape, because Jerry Lawler then merges it with USWA and they start to create something really powerful there. And, and they put the belt on Iceman King Parsons, and then Butch Reed, who then gets the ire of Vince McMahon, who was slated to become the next big thing and screwed himself on that respect, but which we've talked about on the show actually before. And so that is the only admission that I think is kind of differently egregious, but I get it. It wasn't about that. It was about the brothers and the love of the brothers, and that made a lot of sense. And you really, the wrestling is the backdrop of a story that I think Sean Durkin really wanted to tell, and I think he does an amazing job of telling that story. So I agree. Can't fault him for that. So
right. I think the only reason for me why I will still put The Wrestler over this, for me, it's too egregious for me. The Chris and Mike thing.
Yeah,
that's just too much for me. I cannot right that wrong in my head. I just can't. I wish I could, because this is an amazing film, but that's just too much for me.
Yeah.
Plus,
the Wrestler really got into the indie aspect of it.
Right. Plus, it also really showed you furthermore the dark side.
Yeah.
Of the business.
Yeah, which this movie does, but it does it in a...
But it's more the dark side of these individuals, not of the business.
Exactly.
But, I mean, I think the only bit of the business that it showed how...
I think this, as a movie, is really, really super well done.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
And it's all aspects of it, but as the story goes, as somebody who was, a real big fan of world-class championship wrestling and remembers the days when they were on ESPN and all those things, this was far from the real story.
And you know what's funny? I think one of the few times Dave Meltzer and I agree.
There's a time? Oh my God, man. All right, we gotta stop this show now. This is over. We can't do this.
Yeah. Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria! We're not fans of the imitation of Ric Flair by Aaron Dean Eisenberg. But then again, that's like saying another news water wet.
Right.